going to give you a brief update on the research side of things of the Progressive MS Alliance and the work we've been doing over the last over a year and a half or so, and then Torben will take over and talk to you about some other aspects of the project. So just to give an introduction, talking about what progressive forms of MS. Most of you will be quite familiar with this slide here, but the top graph shows how most people with MS start off with a relapsing remitting course, and then over time they build up as there's a gradual accrual of disability to change to the secondary progressive form. Whereas a small percentage of people with MS from the onset start off with a nearly continuous progression of disability where you don't see any distinct relapses. And as described in this paper in neurology a couple of years ago, we know that development of secondary progression is the dominant determinant of long-term prognosis, and this is really independent of disease duration and early relapse frequency. So while we know that the important role that progression plays in the development of the disease, we still have very little understanding about the nature of the disease as it goes from being relapsing to a progressive course. And as the next slide will show, actually, one of the challenges is that we really are struggling also in even defining what progressive MS is. And as you can see here, how it's defined is really dependent on who is describing it. So, for example, a neurologist would describe it as accumulation of disability or a slow change over time and a build-up of cognitive impairment. From an imaging point of view, it could be a gradual accumulation or expansion of lesions and tissue loss. And pathologists might describe it as axonal damage or loss. And for the patient, this means a loss of independence, an inability to work, a worsening of symptoms, and so on. Very important things that impact on their daily lives. And so the situation is a little bit like this picture here, where you have people blindfolded and trying to describe an elephant. And the description will depend very much on the perspective of the person who is trying to describe it. So, and that might actually explain, the reason that we have the challenges that we have in understanding and defining progressive MS would probably go in partway to explaining why we've had all these previous trials. So there has been a lot of work actually going on in progressive MS, but so far we haven't really come up with anything to treat it effectively. So if you look at these trials, you won't be able to see all the details here, but what's shown here is that almost all of them have been negative. We did have recently a trial shown here, the MSIF trial, which did give some promising results. So this was a phase 2 trial of high-dose oral simvastatin. And what they found was, what they showed here was that the group that was taking these statins did show a significant reduction in brain atrophy, and there was also a significant slower time to increase on the EDSS scale. So there was an effect from this trial, but this was a phase 2 trial, and it needs to be confirmed in larger phase 3 trials. But what we do know really is that while now we have 10 approved treatments for relapsing remitting MS, we still don't have any single effective treatment for approved treatment for progressive MS. So these are the results here of a survey that was done in London by Gary Giovannoni's group, and where they asked people if they think that we are doing enough to address the needs of people with progressive MS. And what you can see here is really that there was an overwhelming majority of people who said that they didn't feel enough was being done. So 86% of people said no, another 14% said they're not sure, and nobody said yes. So this is really a major unmet need. So this is something that got several of the MSIF member societies together and thinking that a really concerted, collaborative action needs to be taken to handle progressive MS. And why do we need really a global approach for this? Well, one is that it's the greatest challenge for patients and researchers alike. It's probably the single most important area of research. It's immensely complex, which is probably why to date it has remained unsolved, but also it has a huge impact worldwide. But the reason that we're getting together now is that maybe the timing is right. There have been successful approaches in other areas, in other disease areas. And of course, it's important that it's MS societies leading this effort, because it is the greatest issue for people with MS, and every time another therapy is approved for relapsing MS, most of our supporters feel forgotten. But although there are symptomatic therapies and rehabilitation methods to maximize the abilities and handle quality of life, there's still many, many unmet needs. And it's essential, while we work with several partners in this movement, that it is essential, I believe, that MS societies drive the agenda and maintain focus. So a little bit of background to how we got to this alliance. It started, I would say, way back in 2010 in Boston, when the NMSS led an effort bringing societies and other key thought leaders in the field really together on a think tank. This was followed by several societies who came together to explore the possibility of developing some kind of international consortium or international collaborative on progressive MS. That was in July 2011. And that led really to the start of the setting up of the steering committee of the Progressive MS Alliance. It was known as the International Progressive MS Collaborative at the time, and now known as the Progressive MS Alliance. The steering committee was set up in January 2012. There was a presentation to the MSIF board in October 2012. And what is the Progressive MS Alliance? It is an expanding, and I really emphasize the word expanding here, alliance of MS organizations from around the world. They are united by a mission. The mission is to expedite the development of therapies for effective disease modification and symptom management in progressive MS. We have a website. Yeah. And really the steering committee was made up of the founding members of the organization at that time, which was the National MS Society of the USA, the Canadian MS Society, the Italian MS Society, UK, Netherlands, and MSIF. And the steering committee was made up of the research staff of these organizations, as well as volunteer experts in MS who work with all these organizations. And the steering committee got together and set out a paper. The paper was published in Multiple Sclerosis Journal last year, where they set out a research agenda for how to drive research in progressive MS, how to really accelerate and make advances in progressive MS. And the paper identified 5 key areas of unmet need, and those are here, looking at experimental models of MS. This is really trying to better understand how we can understand how progressive MS works, but also having models, laboratory models that we can test promising drugs before they go into trials. Pathway identification and repurposing of existing drugs. Proof of concept trial design, this is phase 2 trials. Clinical outcome metrics is phase 3 trials, and of course symptom management and rehabilitation. So why have we chosen these 5 priority areas? Mainly because they address gaps in our understanding about progressive MS. So, the steering committee really reviewed this field and looked at the areas where we need to make advances, and these were found as significant gaps in our understanding. It will also create the tools and resources that are needed to accelerate research, and very importantly, it builds on existing research investments. So there's a lot of work going on in this area of progressive MS, through the societies, but also through other organizations. And so we need to build on those, and so that we don't duplicate our efforts, but work alongside them. So let's looking at some of the progressive MS efforts underway. This is just a snapshot of the global progressive MS portfolio. These are of the members of the societies that are participating in this effort. And in 2012, we had more than 200 projects that were being funded by these societies on progressive MS, and that represented about $85 million being spent in this area, and that is in addition to about 45 interventional clinical trials that are currently recruiting. So if you look at some of the trials that are currently going on, some of these may be familiar to you. Some of them are drugs that have already been approved for relapsing remitting MS, and they have been trialed in progressive MS. But also there are some new ones, some new agents which are still entering phase 2 trials. There's mesenchymal stem cells and a whole range of agents that are being tested in progressive MS trials. We also have several other initiatives that are doing work that is closely related to the work of the Alliance. So, for example, the MS Outcomes Assessment Consortium, the International Advisory Committee on Clinical Trials in MS, the UK MS Society's Clinical Trials Network. There's a summit study that's doing a study on risk factors for progression. And there's a center in Italy, in Rome, on experimental therapies, which are looking at repurposing of existing drugs. So it's really critical that we work together with these organizations to really build this movement and taking the research forward. So what do we hope to achieve? We hope to build on these existing researchers, achieve investments, as I said, and to create an integrated, multidisciplinary, collaborative research effort, and to really rally the international research community and bring additional worldwide resources to really push this effort forward. So this is some of the timeline and some of the work that's happened to date. There's a huge amount that's been achieved over the last year. So beginning in after the establishment of the steering committee, the scientific steering committee in January, we had most of last year through April to about September, we engaged the international research community in 5 working groups. So these 5 working groups were focused on the 5 priority research areas that were identified in that paper. And they were really tasked with looking at the gaps in the research and trying to come up with novel funding models, but also novel strategies for how to address these gaps in research. These groups came together in November in London and presented their findings to the steering committee. That was at a meeting in London last year. And following that, the Alliance, the steering committee, was working together to put together a sort of 5-year research strategy going forward and how we will fund research in progressive MS in our key areas. We had the first scientific conference of the Progressive MS Alliance that was in Milan in February this year, and following that, the Scientific Steering Committee has put together, has refined this research strategy, and we put together and released our first international call. This was issued for calling for research proposals in our priority research areas, and that was released a few weeks ago. So that's where we are. This is really a first step. So we've called for, the first call has been on asking for looking at really innovative research projects. So they're short-term projects, and we'll be funding about 10 or 15 in the first round, and there'll be a second round. But this is really the start. There's a 5-year vision for this, so that there's going to be larger, much larger collaborative research proposals as we move forward. So that's really an overview of the research work that's been going on with the Alliance. So just to summarize, really, we know that it's its greatest challenge for patients and researchers, and we believe that the improved understanding will provide greater potential to identify new targets and therapies. And really, it's through greater international collaboration that is essential to raise profile and accelerate progress. And these are the countries that are actively involved in the Alliance. They're playing a role in some ways. Some of them are, the managing members of the Alliance are listed at the bottom of the slide, but these countries are involved in some way. Either they're contributing through their scientists, or they're contributing to the communications or some aspect of this project. So really, it's to say to all of you, if your flag is not up there, talk to your societies and tell them to get involved and connect to end progressive MS. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Torben Damsgaard. I'm from the Danish MS Society. I'm a deputy CEO. I have been with the Danish Society for 18 years. And I've been asked to speak a little about the background for the Danish MS Society to become a partner, get involved in the Progressive MS Alliance. I haven't made a presentation. I think I'll share some thoughts with you, and please ask questions or comment on the way. And my colleague from the Danish MS Society, Dhia, is in your group. She is vice chairman of our board, and she will also be able to, I think, comment and answer questions if you have some questions. So please, let's have a dialogue. I'm going to speak a little about why the Danish MS Society decided to get involved, what are the perspectives that we see, and what are we actually planning on doing now that we have decided to join the Alliance. First of all, I said, why did we get involved? And I'll share a little story with you. Last week during the entrance meeting in Copenhagen, I was interviewed by a journalist in a totally different, about a totally different story. He wanted to, some of our members are buying cannabis because they think it helps them pain, and they wanted Danish society. What did we mean to think about that? And I was interviewed, and after the interview, the journalist said to me, he came directly from interviewing one of our mentors having progressive MS. And he said to me, now that we have finished the interview, your member that I just interviewed asked me to ask you a question. And that question was, why are there no treatment for us having progressive MS? Why don't you do any research in progressive MS? And that is what this is all about, and the background, I think, for the Danish MS Society having decided to get involved. This is what we hear from our members every time we have a meeting where we meet our members. We hear a lot about treatments for relapsing, remitting MS, but every time somebody in the audience says and asks, why are there no treatment for us having been diagnosed with a progressive MS? What are you doing? Why are you not doing any research in that area? And that is, I would say, that the main reason for the Danish MS Society having decided to get involved. I think we tend every time that a new drug is available for treating MS, we tend to say that now there's a new possibility of treating MS, and that is wrong. There's a new possibility of to treat relapsing remitting MS, and more than half of the members of our society still do not have a possibility of having a treatment. So you could say more than half of our members would like us to get involved in this initiative, and that's why we did it. You could say also from a Danish point of view, the researchers in Denmark have quite a strong record in research in progressive MS. Actually, a few years ago, a small coin was taken out of circulation by the Danish National Bank, and because it was worth very little, so people didn't really want to have it anymore. So it was taken out of circulation, and the Danish MS Society decided to collect all these coins, and we had collecting stands in 20,000 shops around the country, and we collected a little more than 200,000 euro. And that amount was actually spent on research in progressive MS. So we do already have a record to build on, and of course we also hope that some of the Danish research teams will be able to contribute to the research projects that are going to take place in the Alliance. So what are the perspectives that we see? First of all, for the reasons that I have already told you, we think we have a very, very strong message. This is what more than half of persons with MS would like us to do. It's clear that it needs an extraordinary coordinated initiative to get this moving. It's strange that there are not even consensus on how to measure the effect of an agent or a drug on progressive MS in order to have it approved as a treatment for progressive MS. And this is part of what the Alliance is trying to solve. So this is a job for the MS societies all over the world to join and take a leading role in this area. It's an international approach, but there's a national role to play. The Danish MS Society thought that we could make a small contribution to this alliance and maybe make a difference doing that. And then we also see new fundraising possibilities here, because we raise, luckily we raise quite a lot of funds do a lot of fundraising in Denmark, but still there are international trusts, there are companies thinking, marketing, acting internationally that we could engage in this initiative, and that it's not competing with the fundraising we do on a national level, because it's money that we would not be able to raise for what we are doing in Denmark alone. So there are new sources to be explored. And finally, what we have decided to do until now in the Danish MS Society is that, first of all, we in November we are going to do a direct marketing appeal for around 60,000 regular donors, and ask them for a special donation especially for this progressive initiative. We have identified a few. Remember, Denmark is a very small country, but we have identified a few trusts that think internationally, and that who we will approach when the time and the strategy is ready for that. And we also have a few international Danish companies that might be interested in participating and joining this. So we have decided to become a contributing partner or member, or what the name will be.
Whatever you decide.
Whatever you decide. Thank you very much, Cindy. That this was a little about the background and our thinking behind becoming a part of that.